Kazan was the absolute champion of underground no-holds-barred fighting, living only for the sound of the bell. On that fateful night, the fighter stepped into the ring against an enraged giant to earn his freedom from the syndicate. His best friend and trainer betrayed him, slipping a deadly poison into his water bottle right before the final round. The toxin quickly paralyzed his nervous system, causing the champion's vision to double and blur. Losing consciousness, Kazan threw his signature right hook on pure reflexes, sending his opponent into a deep knockout. The crowd erupted in cheers, unaware that the undefeated brawler had hit the canvas already dead. But the darkness was not the end, but rather a transition into an entirely different reality. The fighter's soul rushed through space and time to find a new vessel in a cruel world of sword and steel. Kazan woke up from a burning pain in his back, finding himself lying in the dirt. He had reincarnated in the body of a 16-year-old slave named Ash, belonging to a bankrupt baron on the outskirts of the Ethelgard kingdom. A massive overseer towered over him, continuing to beat the weak teenager for amusement in front of the other slaves. Ash tried to stand up, horrified to realize the complete absence of his former body's steel muscles. Looking at his skinny, scarred hands, the former champion realized he was at the very bottom of the food chain. However, his eyes still saw the world with the incredible clarity of a battle-hardened veteran. Noticing the slave's meaningful glare, the enraged overseer threw his whip aside and swung a massive fist to break the boy's neck. For an ordinary person, this strike would be fatal, but Ash saw it in slow motion. Instead of covering his face, the youth made a barely noticeable body movement, allowing the heavy fist to whistle past his ear. Perfect timing replaced his need for brute physical strength. Putting all his meager weight into a single kinetic chain from heel to shoulder, Ash delivered a flawless left hook straight into the giant's liver. The strike landed right under the ribs, causing an instant diaphragm spasm. The massive guard crashed to his knees, gasping for air and drooling from the extreme pain shock. The crowd of beaten slaves froze in absolute silence, unable to believe their eyes. The noise in the courtyard caught the attention of Baron Valerius, who was watching from the balcony of his dilapidated mansion. The drunk aristocrats stared with interest at the scrawny guy who had just knocked out his best fighter. An hour later, the guards brought Ash into the Baron's dusty study, which was littered with debt receipts. Ethelgard was a harsh world, where lords settled territorial disputes through bare-knuckle tournaments of their fighters in arenas. Valerius needed a representative for the upcoming provincial tournament, otherwise his creditors threatened to seize his remaining lands. He offered the slave a deal, promising freedom in exchange for an unlikely victory. The former champion showed no fear and stated his own terms, demanding daily ration of fresh meat and exemption from manual labor. The Baron laughed at such audacity, but agreed to give this strange youth a chance. The next morning, Ash began a brutal training program, using whatever he could find around the old estate. He sprinted up steep hills with heavy stones on his shoulders, rebuilding his body's stamina from scratch. The local fighters relied solely on straightforward strength and wild attacks, so the hero focused entirely on speed and footwork. He spent hours striking homemade sandbags, sharpening his deadly jabs. A month of training bore fruit, and the teenager's body developed lean, defined muscles. Practicing shadow boxing at sunset, he mentally returned to the ring, adapting modern boxing techniques to the realities of this harsh world. On the day of the provincial tournament, the Baron's carriage arrived in a noisy mining town featuring a sandy arena in its central square. An atmosphere of gambling filled the air, and the stands were packed with a bloodthirsty crowd. In the waiting area, Ash was surrounded by the fighters of other lords, scarred giants, and former knights. They loudly mocked the boy's physique, considering him easy prey for the very first round. When the horn blew, the youth calmly stepped onto the sunlit sand, completely ignoring the booing crowd. His torso was bare, and his fists were tightly wrapped in black cloth bandages to protect his knuckles. Ash's opponent was a bald butcher equipped with spiked brass knuckles who charged forward with a furious roar. The giant fully intended to end this fight with a single crushing blow to the head. The boy didn't even raise his hands to block, simply slipping downward in a classic boxing bob. The deadly brass knuckles sliced only the empty air above Ash's head, leaving the butcher's torso completely exposed. Using the enemy's momentum against him, the boxer drove a stiff uppercut straight into the butcher's solar plexus. The strike instantly knocked the wind out of the giant, making his eyes bulge from unbearable pain. The massive fighter collapsed face first into the sand, losing consciousness from oxygen deprivation. The crowd in the stands fell instantly silent, trying to comprehend how a skinny slave had defeated a favorite with a single motion. Only Baron Valerius screamed wildly with joy from his seat, already calculating his massive gambling winnings. Ash calmly turned around and walked back into the shadows, without even glancing at his defeated enemy. Over the next few hours, Ash methodically destroyed his opponents one by one. His pendulum dodging style was completely incomprehensible to the local warriors, who constantly ran into lightning-fast counterattacks. Finally, it was time for the final match against the local champion, a ruthless grappling master. This scarred warrior wore thick leather bracers and loved to break the limbs of his victims in the arena. From the very first seconds, the champion tried to corner Ash and grab his shoulders. However, the youth began to easily dance around him on his toes, constantly changing his distance and angle of approach. Exhausting the clumsy enemy, Ash unleashed a hail of short, snapping jabs onto his face. The champion swung blindly as his nose and lips were turned into a bloody mess under the barrage of precise punches. Having completely lost his temper, the bloody champion let out a feral roar and launched a desperate attack. He put all his strength into one wide, incredibly predictable right-handed swing. At that moment, Ash's pupils narrowed and his irises faintly gleamed with the red light of adrenaline. He stepped right into the danger zone, letting the enemy's fist pass over his shoulder and threw a perfect right cross at the jaw. The force of Ash's punch combined with the charging giant's momentum, creating a devastating kinetic effect. The spectators in the stands distinctly heard the loud crunch of the local champion's breaking jawbone. The once fearsome fighter collapsed onto the sand like a felled tree, showing no signs of life. The referee declared the scrawny slave victorious, and the arena erupted in deafening cheers, acknowledging the birth of a new star. That evening, Baron Valerius nervously handed Ash a rolled-up parchment bearing a royal seal. The hero had kept his word and saved the estate from debt, so he was officially no longer anyone's property. Along with his freedom papers, the youth took a recommendation letter to participate in the capital's arena fights. The provincial ring was merely a light warm-up, and the true elite warriors awaited far ahead. Gathering his meager belongings, Ash threw his iron slave collar into the burning fireplace without a slightest regret. He watched the flames consume the symbol of his weakness, preparing for the long journey north. A week later, Ash was traveling in a merchant cart along the remote, bloody tract leading to the capital of Ethelgard. Baron Valerius tagged along, hoping to make even more gold betting on his former fighter. Suddenly, a massive fallen tree blocked the cart's path. Bandit deserters clad in heavy armor and wielding rusted swords emerged from the thicket, planning on an easy robbery. Realizing the mercenaries would leave no survivors, Ash calmly jumped down to the ground. This time, he wrapped his fists in thick leather belts, knowing that bare knuckles couldn't pierce solid steel. One of the deserters charged at the unarmed boy with a smirk, delivering a heavy downward slash with his sword. To the armor-clad bandit, this kid seemed absolutely suicidal. The former boxer closed the distance instantly, slipping into the enemy's blind spot and grabbing his wrist. Without wasted motion, Ash delivered a brutal elbow strike right into the mercenary's unprotected throat. Choking, the bandit dropped his weapon and reflexively clutched his throat. Ash didn't give him a moment to recover, executing a powerful low sweep behind the knee that sent the armored giant crashing into the mud. The remaining robbers froze in shock, seeing how easily their armed comrade was defeated. The youth dropped into a low stance, preparing to use dirty street fighting tactics against the superior numbers of opponents. Dodging another sword thrust, Ash stomped forcefully onto the knee joint of the second deserter. A sickening crunch echoed out, and the mercenary's leg bent unnaturally in the opposite direction. A young woman watched this bloody massacre with keen interest from the roof of a nearby roadside tavern. Lyra, a young informant from the Shadow Syndicate, was taking quick notes in her leather notebook. Her piercing emerald eyes followed Ash's every technical movement with sheer delight. The girl with the dark purple bob realized this boy was a true rough diamond for the capital's underground arenas. Within a few minutes, all the mercenaries were writhing on the ground, unable to stand due to broken joints and shattered jaws. The youth merely brushed the dust off his pants without suffering a single cut. Lyra gracefully jumped down from the roof and blocked the caravan's path, tossing a gold coin in her hand. With a cunning smirk, she introduced herself as a promoter for the mysterious Black Coin Syndicate. Seeing the Baron's letter in Ash's hands, Lyra only laughed, declaring that such papers were completely worthless in the capital. She offered him a real ticket to the major leagues in exchange for a partnership. Weighing all the risks, the former champion accepted the mysterious girl's offer. He understood that without connections in the capital's criminal underworld, his path to the top would be blocked by a solid bureaucratic wall. After several days of long travel, the monumental stone gates of Ethelgard capital towered before them. This massive metropolis was divided into a gleaming upper city for aristocrats and filthy, crime-ridden lower slums. Ignoring the wealthy districts, Lyra immediately led her new fighter into the darkest alleys of the lower city. Baron Valerius was quickly pushed aside by syndicate thugs, making it clear that his time was over. The girl brought the youth to an underground syndicate workshop where a blind master began taking his measurements. Lyra perfectly understood that to perform in elite arenas, the main hero needed an intimidating and memorable look. Ash donned his new combat attire, perfectly highlighting his lean, shredded musculature. Black leather pants, a long sleeveless coat, and iron-plated open gloves transformed the former slave into the very embodiment of a threat. Inspecting her transformed partner, the promoter nodded with satisfaction. Now, standing before her was not a ragged outcast, but a ruthless predator ready to tear apart any challenger in the brutal capital pits. That same night, they descended deep underground to the famous pits, an illegal arena for the capital's elite. Here, wealthy lords bet entire fortunes on underground death matches. The air in the dungeon was thick with the smell of sweat, cheap alcohol, and fresh blood. Ash inhaled this atmosphere with deep pleasure, for this was where he truly felt alive. To quickly build his rating, Lyra immediately matched him against an experienced martial arts master. Ash's opponent wore no armor, preferring loose pants, and moved with incredible feline grace. Wasting no time on feeling out his opponent, the martial artist leaped into the air, delivering a crushing spinning kick. The attack speed was so fast that an ordinary person wouldn't even have time to blink. Instead of his usual dodging, the boxer took a rigid stance and thrust his sharpened elbow forward. The attacker's shin crashed at full speed into the hardest bone of the human body. A nasty sound of cracking bone echoed out, and the martial arts master collapsed to the stone floor with a scream. The elbow block, known as a limb destruction technique, completely neutralized the enemy's offensive potential. While the opponent writhed in pain holding his battered shin, Ash calmly closed the distance. The former champion delivered a brutal low kick straight to the master's planted leg, permanently taking away his ability to stand. A final short hook to the side of the head sent the kneeling poor guy into a deep knockout. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds, leaving the spoiled audience of the pits in a state of absolute shock. While Ash calmly left the ring, Lyra snatched the massive bag of gold from a pale bookmaker with a wicked smile. The betting odds for the unknown newcomer's victory had been absolutely astronomical. Over the next month, the capital pits turned into Ash's personal hunting grounds. He methodically destroyed elite fighters, easily dodging heavy weapons and delivering pinpoint, deadly strikes to their vulnerable spots. Neither armor or size could save opponents from his perfect understanding of biomechanics. When a massive grappler tried to put the boxer in a hold, the youth simply paralyzed him by digging his fingers into the nerve clusters on his neck. The crowd began to go crazy over their new favorite, dubbing him the armorless demon. Lyra confidently pushed her partner to the very top of the illegal rankings, preparing the ground for their ultimate move. One evening, while Ash was doing 2-finger push-ups in their luxurious room, Lyra returned from a syndicate meeting. The girl tossed a heavy black cast metal token in front of the fighter. It was an official invitation to the royal tournament, the greatest trial of iron and blood. The winner of these deadly games received the title of Royal Fang, vast lands and power comparable to a military general. Squeezing the cold metal in his hand, the former champion felt familiar adrenaline surging through his veins. He would finally be able to challenge the strongest warriors of this brutal world. The day of the royal tournament began with the deafening roar of tens of thousands of spectators in a colossal coliseum. The atmosphere was incredibly tense, as the political influence of the empire's greatest lords was at stake. The ruler of Aethelgard himself sat in the royal box, surrounded by his steel-clad personal guard. The king gazed down at the blood-soaked sand with a bored expression, waiting for a truly worthwhile spectacle. To the ruler's left sat the corrupt Minister of Finance, Lord Malachor. The cunning aristocrat smirked nastily, completely confident in the victory of his own personal pocket monster. The arena gates clanked open, releasing Tiberius into the light, a 2-meter-tall mutant pumped full of Malachor's forbidden alchemy. A toxic green haze surrounded the bald giant, and rusted knuckles were embedded directly into his flesh instead of gloves. In the very first round, Tiberius demonstrated his inhuman nature. Completely ignoring sword strikes, the monster simply tore apart his opponent's steel armor with his bare hands, causing sheer terror in the stands. Watching this slaughter from the dark gladiator tunnel, Ash felt a genuine threat for a long while. His boxer instincts told him that this beast felt absolutely no pain whatsoever. When the herald announced the name of the armorless demon, Ash calmly stepped onto the scorching sand. The spectators booed in confusion, unable to understand how this skinny guy in leather pants had made it to the semifinals. His semifinal opponent was Garrick, nicknamed the Iron Wall, a noble knight of the king. The broad-shouldered blonde wore a heavy half-armor featuring a golden lion, and his right arm was encased in a massive steel gauntlet. Unlike the butchers from the outskirts, Garrick fought for honor. Noticing Ash's serious gaze, the knight respectfully struck his chest with his steel fist, recognizing the youth as a worthy warrior. With the sound of the gong, the knight instantly closed the distance, moving frighteningly fast for a man in heavy armor. Garrick used the weight of his equipment to turn his own body into a rushing battering ram. Ash threw a lightning-fast jab to test his reaction. However, the knight brought up his massive gauntlet with perfect timing, firmly blocking the boxer's attack. A dull ache burned through the boxer's knuckles despite his protective glove plates. Ash quickly realized that standard body blows would cause absolutely no harm to the steel-clad knight. Giving the hero no time to breathe, the Iron Wall delivered a crushing backhand strike with his armored arm. This attack felt more like a shield bash, fully capable of caving in a horse's skull. Ash executed a sharp pullback, forcing his spine to arch deeply. The deadly steel swept a millimeter past his nose, washing his face with a gust of cold wind. Understanding the rules of the game, the boxer drastically changed his stance. He tucked his fists tightly against his chin, grouped up, and began to rhythmically weave his torso side to side, tracing a figure 8 in the air. Using a special deep breathing technique, the hero maximized the blood flow in his muscles. Faint steam began to rise from his heated body, creating the illusion of a sinister dark aura. When Garrick threw a straight cross, the youth seemingly vanished into thin air, masterfully slipping under the striking arm. Ash found himself right up against the knight, directly in the most dangerous blind spot. The boxer unleashed an endless avalanche of short, explosive hooks upon the knight. He didn't try to pierce the chest plate, but methodically battered the enemy's unprotected joints, elbows, and armpits. Overwhelmed by such speed, the iron wall went into a full defensive shell. He pressed his armored gauntlet tightly against his face, hoping to simply weather this furious storm of flesh and bone. But that was exactly what Ash was waiting for. Abruptly changing his attack angle, he put all his leg strength into a series of devastating uppercuts that crashed directly into the knight's steel helmet with a deafening ring. The boxer had no intention of breaking the impenetrable metal. The laws of physics did the work for him. The massive kinetic energy from the strikes transferred through the helmet, causing the knight's brain to rattle violently inside his skull. After a dozen such hits, the heavily armed warrior's legs buckled. Garrick staggered, completely losing his spatial orientation due to a severe concussion, and dropped his arms helplessly. Seeing his enemy broken, Ash stopped his fist mid-swing for the killing blow and took a step back. The champion respected noble fighters and had no intention of finishing off a defenseless man. Breathing heavily, the iron wall dropped to one knee. Tearing the dented helmet from his head, the knight raised a trembling hand, officially acknowledging his absolute defeat against the skinny youth. The Colosseum literally erupted with insane screams of joy and disbelief. Even the bored king of Athelgard raised an eyebrow in surprise, seeing a nameless slave defeat the pride of his guard. Up in the VIP box, Lord Malachar grew pale with rage, gripping his golden wine goblet so hard that it crumpled like paper. His perfect plan to seize power was now under serious threat. Returning to the cool locker room, Ash sat down heavily on a bench while Lyra carefully rewrapped his knuckles, which were bruised blue from striking steel. The final, most terrifying fight still lay ahead. The promoter showed the youth a stolen file on Tiberius, warning him that Malachar's monster was an alchemical golem in the flesh. This creature had all its pain receptors and survival instincts artificially blocked. Hearing about an opponent who knew neither pain nor fear, the former underground champion merely smiled bloodthirstily. Clenching his bandaged fists until they cracked, Ash prepared to prove that human spirit and technique would always surpass mindless strength. While the boxer rested before the final, an assassin hired by Lord Malachor silently sneaked into the dimly lit locker room. The killer had already raised his hand over the drinking pitcher, preparing to mix in a powerful paralytic poison. However, Lyra was an elite syndicate spy who always calculated enemy moves in advance. The girl threw a hidden blade with such force that it firmly pinned the corrupt poisoner's wrist to the thick oak table. Picking up the shattered vial from the floor, the youth merely smirked darkly at the cruel irony of fate. In his past life, poisoned water had cost him his title and life, but now he allowed himself no such weaknesses. Leaving the groaning assassin to bleed out, the challenger confidently strode down the long corridor toward the blinding light of the arena. Lyra watched her champion go, realizing that the fate of the entire kingdom was about to be decided. The herald shouted the names of the finalists, and the stands of the giant Colosseum shook from the crowd's primal roar. The king of Ethelgard slowly lowered his hand, officially starting the last and bloodiest fight of the year. The 2-meter-tall alchemical mutant Tiberius menacingly slammed his flesh-embedded brass knuckles together. The toxic green haze around his body thickened, revealing an extreme concentration of combat stimulants pumping through his blood. Unlike the enraged golem, the armorless demon maintained icy composure.
Lightly bouncing on his feet, the hero analyzed every movement of the giant, searching for the slightest openings in his impenetrable muscle armor. Without making a sound, Tiberius dashed forward with a speed terrifying for his size, leaving deep craters in the sand. The monster tried to decapitate the boxer with a wild, sweeping strike, capable of breaking a bull's spine. The youth slipped under the striking arm, and rotating his hips, drove a perfect left hook right into the mutant's liver. The punch was so powerful that a loud echo rang across the arena from knuckles meeting flesh. But Tiberius didn't even blink. Due to the alchemical blockers in his brain, the giant was physically incapable of feeling a diaphragm spasm, so he merely lowered his terrifying gaze upon his surprised opponent. Counterattacking instantly, the golem threw a heavy knee straight into the hero's chest. Ash barely managed to cross his forearms to block, but the monstrous kinetic force threw him several meters back across the sand. The former champion barely stayed on his feet, dodging the continuous hail of strikes from the rusted brass knuckles. The monster took no breaks to breathe, unleashing an endless avalanche of deadly iron upon the boxer. One of the strikes glanced off, harshly clipping Ash's right side. The unpleasant crunch of a broken rib echoed out, and the youth spat a clot of blood onto the sand, feeling real pain for ages. Realizing that aiming for the head or body was useless, Ash abruptly broke off the distance and switched to a wide stance. He decided to change his tactics and destroy the foundation of this meat building. When the mutant charged forward again, the boxer delivered a ruthless, chopping low kick with his heel. The strike landed exactly on the golem's peroneal nerve, hidden under a thin layer of skin just below the knee. No matter how numb Tiberius was, the laws of physiology were inexorable. The damaged nerve stopped sending signals to the muscles, causing the mutant's massive leg to buckle involuntarily, ruining his perfect balance. Without giving the enemy time to recover balance, the hero dropped his entire body weight on the giant's kneecap. A loud crack echoed out as the joint shattered under the pressure, permanently stripping the monster of its mobility. Tiberius crashed heavily to one knee, but even in this position, he continued swinging his iron fist furiously. The mutant turned into a cornered beast, ready to tear apart anyone who came close. The armorless demon smoothly weaved from side to side, slipping through the wall of deadly strikes like a ghost. Ash coldly stepped into close range, preparing to deliver the final chord. The former champion's eyes flared with the bright scarlet light of absolute focus. He aimed directly at the center of the golem's chest, where the heart-pumping alchemical blood beat wildly. The boxer unleashed a flurry of dozens of short, explosive punches that blurred into a solid gray streak. Every strike to the solar plexus caused a micro-disruption in the alchemical monster's heart rhythm. This technique, medically known as commotio cordis, induced critical arrhythmia. Tiberius's artificially accelerated heart couldn't withstand the kinetic shock, twitched one last time, and stopped forever. The giant froze like a stone statue, with his fist raised to strike. The eerie, unnatural light in his eyes finally faded out.
The lifeless carcass of the mutant crashed face first into the blood-soaked sand with a deafening thud. The winner remained standing over his defeated enemy, breathing heavily and lightly clutching his broken side. A second of silence was replaced by an absolutely unimaginable explosion of sheer joy. Tens of thousands of spectators leaped from their seats. The crowd chanted the new champion's name, showering the arena with gold coins and flowers. At the same time, in the royal box, a disgraced Lord Malachor panicked and tried to flee. However, the royal guard harshly subdued the corrupt minister whose schemes had finally been exposed. The king of Ethelgard slowly stood up from his golden throne, commanding silence from the crowd. The ruler personally held the winner's reward, a luxurious black cloak with golden fur, the ultimate symbol of power. Acknowledging the laws of this world, the former slave calmly took a knee before the royal box. From this moment on, Ash officially ceased to be just a street fighter, becoming the Royal Fang. Servants hurriedly brought out special reward chests onto the arena, containing the new general's personal armor.
This equipment had been forged based on Lyra's individual blueprints, specifically for the boxer's combat style. But the award ceremony was violently interrupted in the most terrifying way. A giant stone wall of the Colosseum suddenly blew to pieces. A deafening explosion shook the Capitol, instantly engulfing the arena in thick, acrid smoke and flames. A monstrous stampede began in the stands, with cheers of joy quickly replaced by screams of pure terror. Dozens of blood-red banners belonging to the neighboring militaristic Vargan Empire appeared through the clearing black smoke. Elite soldiers of the enemy empire clad in spiked black armor flooded through the breach like vultures. They cared nothing for tournament rules, methodically and ruthlessly slaughtering the unarmed Ethelgard guards. The shocked ruler hastily retreated deeper into his box, while his personal guard desperately tried to form a shield wall. The invasion had been planned perfectly, catching the kingdom's capital at its maximum vulnerability. The loyal knight Garrick, forgetting his tournament injuries, grabbed a heavy two-handed sword. The iron wall rushed to the front line with a furious roar, desperately trying to hold back the tide of black-armored invaders. In the midst of this bloody chaos, Ashe remained completely motionless, calculating the scale of the disaster. Spotting Lyra hiding behind the columns, the youth met her eyes, and the girl gave a short nod, offering silent permission for the slaughter. The boxer kicked open the reward chest and quickly donned his final combat attire, a light mithril chainmail draped over a black turtleneck, while massive spiked bracers made of tempered blued steel covered his forearms. An enemy infantryman charged at the hero with a scream, swinging a heavy halberd widely. Ashe didn't even move from his spot, simply raising his new steel bracer to block the strike, striking a shower of bright sparks. After harshly blocking the strike, the boxer grabbed the weapon's shaft with his left hand, depriving the enemy of mobility. With his right fist clad in heavy brass knuckles, he delivered a crushing blow that caved the soldier's faceplate inward. The newly minted general plunged into the thick of the battle, using the arena as his personal weapon. He kicked up a cloud of sand, instantly blinding a whole group of heavily armored Vargan infantrymen. Noticing that Garrick was surrounded, Ashe executed an incredible leap, using an enemy's back as a springboard. In midair, the hero drove his knee straight into the base of the neck of a soldier about to cowardly stab the knight from behind. The two greatest fighters of the tournament stood back to back in the middle of the burning Colosseum, breathing heavily from exhaustion. A tight circle of dozens of elite black knights from the hostile empire closed in around them. Without waiting to be attacked, the Royal Fang threw himself at the wall of steel enemies. Using a wrestling takedown, Ashe slammed a massive armored soldier to the ground, taking the fight into a dangerous groundwork phase. Ignoring the heavy armor, the boxer applied Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills from his past life. Sitting on top in full mount, he locked the enemy's head in a death grip and snapped his neck with a sharp twist.
When Ashe rose from the blood-soaked sand, thick white steam began rising from his overheated body. His muscles were working at the absolute limit of human capacity, making him look like a true demon of war rising from hell. Even the battle-hardened Vargan veterans began to back away in primal terror from this aura of murder. They lowered their weapons, completely unable to look into the ruthless red eyes of this absolute monster. Suddenly, a colossal figure in a heavy cloak leaped down from the ruined Colosseum wall right into the center of the arena. The landing created such a shockwave that nearby soldiers were simply scattered away like ragdolls. The cloak fell away, revealing the Emperor of Vargan himself, a man with a genetic mutation that made his muscle fibers as dense as granite. The tyrant ruler, covered with thousands of old scars, towered menacingly over the battlefield. Demonstrating his monstrous strength, the Emperor grabbed the charging royal guard by the face with a single giant hand. He simply squeezed his fingers and the steel helmet crumpled along with the poor man's skull.
Casually tossing the mangled corpse aside, the tyrant slowly turned his massive head, his heavy, oppressive gaze locked precisely on Ash's icy eyes, completely ignoring everyone else in the arena. Sensing the aura of a true apex predator, the former underground champion smoothly shifted into his signature combat stance. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, a wide, maniacal smile of anticipation for a perfect fight bloomed on Ash's blood-smeared face. Wasting no time on words, the Emperor of Vargan dashed forward. His granite-like muscles provided such monstrous explosive speed that the air around his massive body literally warped from the pressure. The former champion barely managed to open the distance using a sliding footwork technique. The tyrant's fist missed the youth's face but ripped through the arena stone slabs like wet dirt with a deafening crash. Counterattacking instantly, the boxer put all his weight into a stiff right cross to the giant's ribs. However, only a dull metallic thud echoed from Ash's knuckles despite his steel brass knuckles. The genetic mutation made the Emperor's muscle fibers so dense that ordinary body blows were completely useless. The tyrant slowly turned his head toward the youth, his face stretching into a terrifying, condescending smirk. The Lord of Vargan casually backhanded him as if swatting away an annoying fly. Ash managed to put up a cross-arm block, but the monstrous kinetic energy threw him several meters backward. Sliding across the blood-soaked sand, the hero managed to stay on his feet. His light mithril chain mail on his forearms was torn, proving that even a glancing blow from this monster was incredibly lethal. At that moment, the wounded Garrick decided to help his recent rival. The noble knight rushed at the Emperor from behind with a furious battle cry, raising his heavy two-handed sword for a strike. Without even turning around, the ruler of Vargan caught the deadly blade with his bare hand. He, with one slight flick of his wrist, snapped the tempered steel in half, leaving Garrick in absolute shock. With a short front kick, the tyrant smashed the knight straight into the ruined Colosseum wall. The iron wall collapsed into a pile of stones and instantly lost consciousness, eliminated from the battle. Realizing that help was out of question, Ash began coldly scanning the enemy's anatomy. The boxer searched for areas not protected by the anomalous muscle mass, eyes, joints, and the fragile airway on the neck. The youth charged into close combat, turning into an elusive shadow. He perfectly executed pendulum head movement, letting the giant's massive fists pass mere millimeters from his temples. Picking the perfect moment, Ash threw a snapping jab right at the tyrant's right eye. However, the Emperor possessed phenomenal reflexes and managed to squint, taking the hit on his thick brow ridge. Angered by his opponent's audacity, the ruler of Vargan tried to catch the youth in a deadly bear hug. He spread his arms wide, intending to crush the agile boxer like a vice. Instead of retreating, Ash dropped sharply on his back, using his body's momentum. He slid right between the clumsy giant's legs, ending up directly behind him. Leaping to his feet, the hero delivered the hardest possible low kick into the back of the enemy's knee. But this time, biomechanics failed. The Emperor's ligaments proved to be as strong as steel cables. Spinning instantly, the tyrant unleashed a crushing back fist on the boxer. Ash created distance just in time, and the enemy's fist merely shattered the top of a nearby stone column. Breathing heavily, the former underground champion realized that a war of attrition would lead to his inevitable death. He needed just one perfect strike to the Adam's apple, but the giant kept his chin tucked down.
Making the riskiest decision of his life, Ash stopped moving. The youth deliberately dropped his steel-clad hands to his sides, completely exposing his torso and head to an attack. Seeing this obvious gap in defense, the Emperor of Vargan sneered predatorily. The tyrant tensed every granite muscle in his body, preparing to put all his inhuman power into one final obliterating lunge.
With a furious roar, the giant pushed off the ground, turning into an unstoppable armored projectile. His massive right fist flew straight at the boxer's exposed face, leaving absolutely no chance to dodge. But instead of trying to evade, the armorless demon took a sharp step directly toward death. The youth thrust his left arm forward, intentionally taking the monstrous strike directly onto his own bones. A sickening crunch echoed, drowning out even the noise of the surrounding battle. The ulna and radius bones of Ash's left arm instantly splintered, with sharp fragments tearing through the flesh from the inside. Experiencing unbearable, blinding pain, the hero didn't make a single sound. Using his broken, limp limb, he firmly trapped the striking arm of the stunned emperor, completely depriving him of mobility. Due to the momentum of his own monstrous charge and the sudden block, the tyrant stumbled forward. His head reflexively jerked back, completely exposing his only vulnerable spot, his massive neck. The trap had sprung. Ash activated his perfect kinetic chain. Energy originated in his right foot, spiraled up through his hips, twisted his obliques, and erupted into his right shoulder. Channeling all his willpower and pain into one destructive impulse, the boxer threw a flawless right uppercut. His black steel-clad fist smashed directly into the Emperor's Adam's apple with the force of a cannonball. Anatomy proved powerless against pure physics. The dense neck muscles couldn't protect the fragile laryngeal cartilages. The tyrant's trachea was instantly crushed, permanently blocking oxygen from reaching his lungs. The strike held such incredible power that the 2-meter incredibly heavy body of the genetic mutant was briefly lifted off the ground. The Vargan ruler's eyes widened in primal terror and utter incomprehension. The hero sharply pulled back his friction-smoking fist and stepped away. His mangled left arm dangled lifelessly along his body, drenching the ruined arena tiles with streams of hot blood. The invincible tyrant frantically grabbed his shattered throat with both hands. He made pathetic wheezing sounds, desperately trying to draw in even a drop of air, but his destroyed trachea refused to function. The lord of the great empire, before whom entire nations trembled, collapsed helplessly to his knees in front of the former slave. His pupils rolled back as his brain rapidly shut down from severe hypoxia. After a few seconds of agony, the massive body of the emperor fell face first into the dust with a dull thud. The most terrifying man on the continent had been killed by a single, highly technical boxer's punch. The chaos of the battle instantly ceased. The elite Vargan infantrymen clad in black steel stood frozen like statues, staring in absolute disbelief at the lifeless corpse of their invincible god emperor. The invaders' morale was shattered in that exact second. Heavy swords and halberds began to slip from the weakened hands of the Vargan soldiers, clattering loudly to break the silence of the ruined Colosseum. Seizing to confusion, the Ethelgard guards surrounded the demoralized enemy with triumphant battle cries. The neighboring empire's blitzkrieg had choked out before it even truly began. Amidst this historic triumph, the armorless demon stood completely alone. His face was covered in ash and enemy blood, his eyes reflecting the incredible exhaustion of a man who had fulfilled his duty. Lyra emerged from behind the ruined columns, tearing the hem of her cloak into bandages as she walked. For the first time, genuine worry for her reckless partner showed on the pragmatic spy's face. Reaching Ash, she silently began binding his mangled left arm tightly to stop the arterial bleeding. The former underground champion merely offered a weak smirk, giving his ally a grateful nod. Regaining consciousness, Garrick slowly limped toward the youth, leaning heavily on his broken two-handed sword. Casting aside his knightly pride, the giant bowed deeply and respectfully to the man who saved his kingdom. The king of Ethelgard himself, accompanied by his surviving retinue, climbed down the rubble directly onto the blood-soaked arena. Only absolute reverence for the fighter's strength could now be seen in the arrogant monarch's eyes. The ruler personally approached the wounded hero and draped the luxurious black cloak with golden fur over his shoulders. Ash officially became not just a general, but a living legend of this cruel world. A year later, the capital had fully recovered from the war. The Syndicate of the Black Coin, now led entirely by Lyra, took firm control over both the shadow and official economy of Aethelgard. Ash refused the position of a staff general, preferring to remain the king's free blade. Whenever he walked through the palace corridors, noble lords and knights parted before him in fear and absolute respect. Instead of engaging in political intrigues, the hero founded his own combat academy for slum orphans. He personally taught the young kids the harsh science of boxing, footwork, and defense without heavy armor. He showed them how proper weight transfer and perfect timing could shatter any obstacle. Looking at these kids, Ash remembered his long journey from a beaten slave to the greatest warrior. On a warm evening, standing on the balcony of the capital's highest spire, Ash watched the setting crimson sun. Lyra approached silently from behind, handing her partner a crystal glass of expensive wine. The hero confidently took the glass with his left hand, which was covered in a network of rough scars, a reminder of victory's price. The girl leaned softly against his shoulder, enjoying rare moments of absolute peace. But despite gaining power, wealth, and recognition, the Kazan native's heart still belonged to the ring. Clenching and unclenching his fist, he felt his blood demanding new, even stronger opponents. As if answering his silent challenge, the heavens above the horizon suddenly split apart, spawning a giant glowing rift. The world of Aethelgard was merely the first step, and the true trials were just beginning. Seeing the unknown threat, the armorless demon felt no fear, only a wild, primal thrill. Pulling the steel glove onto his hand, Ash broke into his signature maniacal smile, fully ready for the next round.